Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Thursday evening to you all. Hope you guys have had a great Thursday and having a great week out there. We're about to make our way to the end of it into another weekend, but I got you probably what I would say is the biggest tropics update of the 2022 season, and not necessarily because we have all of a sudden some threatening scenario, but there's been some shifts today, and I wouldn't even call it a trend quite yet, but there's been some shifts on the models that really present a scenario that we don't like to see, which could potentially be a threatening scenario. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but just keep in mind as I show you this video and I show you some model runs, it's just one model and they change multiple times throughout the day. But what we watch for in the medium to long term of any kind of weather, winter weather, a tornado outbreak, a potential severe weather event in the tropics, is that medium to long range. We watch for trends in the models. And that's how we can forecast things, right? So just keep in mind, if you see a hurricane slamming in your particular state, that doesn't mean it's 100% guaranteed to happen. So I always want to put that in there when we start to have something that could potentially happen. So we got Tropical Storm Fiona, and that's what we're going to break down for you guys tonight. You know it's serious when I put the glasses on. No, I'm just kidding. My eyes are just very dried out. I had to give my eyes a break from my contacts. But anyways, if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. I make 2 videos a day, guys, so I'm always pumping out the content. And I really appreciate you guys supporting just somebody who has a passion for something, which is the weather in this case. So I really love you guys. Appreciate you guys. And definitely hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Hit me up on Twitter, guys. It's a great way to follow along. It's not always super serious. I like to interact with you guys, have a little fun sometimes when it's warranted. And if you don't know how to reach me on Twitter, I'm at scweather_WX. And just follow me there or hit the link under the video. It's a great way to follow along. And lastly here, guys, if you guys got anything that I can pray over, please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it, and it gives others an opportunity to do so too. So check it out. 5 p.m. update. Tropical Storm Fiona's out there. It's a 60-mile-per-hour storm. It's moving along. Tropical storm warnings up for the northern Leeward Islands. Tropical storm watches up for Puerto Rico, which should start to affect Puerto Rico around the later part of this coming weekend. You'll start to see effects of it as early as this coming weekend, just the beginning of it. But one thing we're watching, and the next update comes out in probably about 30 to 45 minutes to 1 hour, which will be the 8 p.m. update. I would say probably as we get into tomorrow, you're going to see an H here. S stands for storm, so it's forecast to stay a tropical storm per the National Hurricane Center all the way through about 2 p.m. next Tuesday, so that's next week. But again, I'm not going to guarantee it, but I can say that I would not be surprised if this cone might shift a little bit back southwest, but we'll watch. But the idea is, and we're going to talk about all this in this video, so please stay tuned. We're going to talk about all the model runs, all the major model runs in the first half of the video, but stay tuned for the second half of the video, because I don't want to just jump on here and show you guys a bunch of flashy model runs and then head on out and not really explain it. Part of doing this is diving deep into what's promoting a system from strengthen, or what's promoting weakening, and or sustaining weakening in this case potentially. And what's driving the directional flow, the steering currents of the system? Because that's really the big question here. We already got a storm. So what's steering this? Where is this going to head? And that's what everybody's wondering. So we're going to try to figure that out in the coming days. But here we go. Latest 5 p.m. update, 60-mile-per-hour storm. So let's take a look at the entire Atlantic Basin right here. Your eyes go to this, and that's where it should go. This is Tropical Storm Fiona. And I'm telling you, it's doing about as best as it possibly can do in its conditions right here. All the main convection is displaced from the low-level circulation, and this is typically pretty normal for a highly sheared system, and it is. Dry air slamming this system, and the reason this satellite visibility goes blurry on you is because the sun is setting on the Atlantic. That's why it gets blurry on the last few frames here. But if you look at this little cinnamon roll swirl right here, that is the low-level circulation, basically the center of the system. And if you notice, all the convection, all the worst weather is only on the only on the eastern portion of the storm. It's because the entire northern, western, basically the entire central to western half of the storm is getting sheared pretty badly. So, and there's a lot of dry air, a lot of mid-level dry air. And that's been something that's plagued the basin from any kind of tropical activity, which is good for the entire hurricane season so far. But this is a typical looking sheared tropical system. all the mid-level convection that you need over that low-level circulation for it to become what we call vertically stacked is not there. It's all displaced, but this system is hanging on. Basically, where all the nasty weather is, it's still pretty intense in this area. Just based off the recon and the hurricane hunters going into this system and what they're picking up on wind speed wise, which I didn't have a panel for up for that. I should, but I didn't. But anyways, we're going to go over the European GFS, even take a look at the Canadian and the Icon models here and break this down for you guys. And I'm going to tell you, things have significantly shifted today. I mean substantially shifted, not in just the global runs, but also in the ensembles, which is something you really look at in the mid to long range stuff. So I'm telling you now, whatever you see is not guaranteed to happen. It's just model runs, it's just ensembles, but we look for trends. We look for trends, right? So here we go, latest European, and forgive me if I adjust my glasses a lot. I don't wear them consistently a lot. I just wear them at night sometimes. But here comes the European getting into Friday morning. Here comes tropical storm conditions throughout the day tomorrow into Saturday morning, working their way into the northern Leeward Islands. We'll kind of go in quicker motion here. Now the latest European now has whatever this is, which will be, it is Fiona, but does it weaken? Does it kind of get shredded apart? I don't think it will here in the near term, but it has the center of the system being south of Puerto Rico at this point. So it's starting to like the idea of taking more of just an east to west flow here. And the idea is, the thinking is the weaker this stays, the more west-northwest it's going to work, as opposed to going northwest, then north, and then heading out the sea. So the more it works this way, the more it becomes a threat in the long term, in the 7 to 10 to 14 day range to the U.S. So that's what we need to watch out for. So I'm still speaking to my folks here in Jamaica and Cuba. That's a trend you guys need to watch too. So the latest European has this making landfall as a tropical storm in the Dominican Republic, Hispaniola. Making landfall, going over those high peaks. It probably weakens. Then around Tuesday afternoon, it doesn't really start to move into the Bahamas. Now, it will here in a minute, but instead it rides into Cuba as a tropical storm still. As we get into Thursday morning, we're getting into about 6-7 days out at this point. And now it finally moves north of Cuba, starts to ride right in the middle of the Bahamas about 7 days from now. Watch this number drop. The more it drops, the stronger the system. And due to ridging, and we're going to talk about the steering currents in the second half of the video. Stick with me. And we're going to talk about why the Euro has this pulling into Florida now. Now you got a strengthening system, and it makes it to about a 990 millibar low pressure, which is a borderline Category 1 hurricane, strong tropical storm. It makes landfall in Florida next weekend, about 9-10 days out, as a tropical storm north of Miami. It's something we need to watch. And then it cruises over the peninsula, and then it stops at 10 days out, and you got a tropical storm right over Florida. That's the latest European run. What's the latest GFS? This one hot off the press, and I have to show you a different look here because Tropical Tidbits is having a little bit of a hard time. But this is our system. It's another great way to look at this because it shows the dry air and the moist air. Here it comes. Here comes our system. Our tropical storm making it into the Leeward Islands, the northern Leeward Islands this weekend, starts to affect areas of Puerto Rico as we're getting really into our Saturday night, Sunday. But look at this L. Look how significantly more south it is. Now, you compare this at this range for Sunday morning to the GFS prior to this from 12Z from earlier this afternoon. Look at the big difference here. It's pulling more west-southwest. So, the weaker the storm stays, the more it just goes more due west, or maybe even just west-southwest. And then it actually moves south of Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, Haiti. It moves, starts to get close to Jamaica, but doesn't quite make it there. We get into next Tuesday evening. Finally, it starts to move north. It gets into the Bahamas, rides all through the Bahamas as we're getting into at this point. If you're confused at any kind of time stamp that I'm mentioning, just look up here, right up here, September 22nd. This is getting into Thursday morning, next Thursday morning, about 6 to 7 days from now. You got a tropical storm, a strengthening tropical storm riding all through the Bahamas, and suddenly this starts rapidly intensifying, probably because it's over the Gulf Stream, very warm waters, and now the GFS, you look at this. This is for next Friday afternoon, about 8 days from now. You compare the latest 18Z run to the 12Z run from earlier this afternoon. Look at how much of a difference it is. Look at this shift west from one model run. It's one model run. It's one gigantic shift. So you now got a major hurricane, and it looks like it's heading right towards the Carolinas. It's right in the armpit of the southeast. And it starts to finally find a weakness, and then it makes landfall, Rodanthe, the Outer Banks, as a major, probably Category 4 hurricane. And then if you were to keep the run going, even though, it's getting very far out at this point, it keeps riding and getting very close, and then gets very, very close to southern New England. And then it threatens Nova Scotia. But guys, it's so far out. It's over 10 days out. But I can tell you, that is not the trend you want to see. But it's very hard to call this a trend until we get into the overnight, we get into tomorrow. If we're sitting here and it's, I would say, if we get the next 48 hours, or if we're sitting here and it's Saturday evening, and we're still seeing this, and if it even starts to move a little bit more west, we might have a problem. So, something to watch. Now, the Canadian has been huge on this moving more west in general. Canadian, we cruise on through Tuesday morning. I can say the Canadian has inched a little bit more northeast in general, but has a tropical storm thrashing through the Bahamas, and then makes landfall as probably a Category 1, borderline Category 2 hurricane around Miami next Thursday evening, about 7 days out from now, and then cruises over the peninsula of Florida, and then gets into the Gulf of Mexico and makes another landfall in New Orleans about 10 days out. That's what the Canadian shows. Now the Icon goes 120 hours out, and this is what it looks like around next Tuesday afternoon. It's much different than all three of those other models I just showed. It's now liking the idea of this turning much quicker. And guys, this could totally change by the time we wake up in the morning. That's why it's important to continue to tune in. But I can tell you, the latest European ensembles from 1 week from today, I like to look at this first, 180 hours out. The weaker members in the blues, these are the weaker members, want to go more west in general. The stronger members, the ones you see in the more brighter colors, the oranges, the reds, the pinks, those are your stronger members. The lower that number, and this makes up 50 different runs. The stronger members continue to want to turn quicker. But I can tell you this is a big difference from what we were seeing 20 hours ago. And we'll go 10 days out at this point, and a lot of these miss, which is good, but a lot of them come very, very close. So we got to watch. One thing I'll show you also, and I don't show this often, but it's a great way to look at this. This is what you call the GEFS ensemble. So it's the same thing, but it's the GFS ensembles instead of the European ensembles. So this is the ones that are coming out right now, the 18C GEFS ensembles. And take a look at this. This is for next Tuesday evening. Look at all the members of the Bahamas, but look at the ensembles prior to this run. Look at that. They were all consolidated. This was looking good. This was looking like you had a good signal for a pretty strong hurricane that was starting to turn north. And the only bad thing is it would threaten Bermuda. But look at the latest 18Z run. Look at that shift. Look at the uncertainty basically increase. It causes more of a problem with trying to figure this out. That's a pretty big shift. This is earlier. This is earlier. You got a lot more weaker runs. But I know people are thinking, well, weaker's good, right? But it's not. A weaker system, regardless, is going to struggle, right? Because it's going to interact with these high mountaintops of Cuba, Hispaniola, just the greater Antilles. But, eventually, it's going to get away from these islands, and it's going to get over some type of body of water. And I think the chances are low that Cuba or Hispaniola is going to completely dismantle Fiona. I think it's very low. So hopefully you guys have stayed to this part of the video because it does mean a lot. So the reason there's two big reasons, well, three reasons why we're maintaining a weaker storm in the short term. One is because, and I'll stop this for tomorrow evening, this is right around where the system should be, affecting the Leeward Islands, the northern Leeward Islands. you know, a lot of its moisture is going to trail the actual center of the storm. So you got a lot of dry air that's going to just keep this a tropical storm. A lot of shear. You got a tut kind of coming down right down here, and I'll show you that here in a second. So this is going to be kind of like a half a tropical storm. Most, you know, the center of the storm will roll through, but all the worst showers and storms will be on one side of the storm, which in this case will be the eastern part of the storm. And you can see that clear as day right here. This is the center of the storm. This is all the convection on the eastern side of the storm. So you go back to this. You continue to move this. Now, as you get, and I'm just showing you the European as an example, as you get this into the areas of the Dominican Republic, for example, right around this area, you start to get a more intact moisture bubble. You start to lose, you know, there's still dry air, but the influence to the storm is not as substantial or anything. But you still got tut, you still got some shear, and most importantly, this is going to interact with these higher mountaintops of Hispaniola, and if it gets in Cuba, Cuba will also be a threat to the system. So land interaction, shear, and dry air is going to prevent it from being a strong storm between now and the weekend and early next week. But as soon as it gets into the southwest Atlantic and the Bahamas in this area, if it does, which it looks like it is, all bets are off. This starts to get a moisture bubble, and it creates its own environment. We can see this here also. Here comes the system. It starts to enter a decent environment as soon as right now. It's still getting affected by shear, dry air, but then it starts to interact with land right into here. But as it finally gets away next week of land, it starts to get maybe an anticyclonic flow, a nice outflow of storms begin to ventilate, pushes air away from the center of the storm, allows for air to rise, which we know rising air causes convection, that showers and storms. And then it's just a matter of time of how much time does it have to strengthen in this area. Now, 1 week out, 7, 8, 9 days out, we don't know the environmental factors that are going to be affecting the storm. But as we get closer, we're starting to become more and more comfortable talking about that. But so it's that. As far as steering currents, let's take a look at the European model. The European model now, and here it is. You barely can see it, but that's actually the system right here. And you'll see a blue pop up right in this area. That is symbolizing a low pressure. So what happens is the storm remains weak on the latest models, the GFS and the European, which are the two biggest models. Storm remains weak. It's influenced more by just steering currents in general. It can't control its own as much as a stronger storm would. It's not able to find this weakness out here. At the same time, you have a ridging building over the eastern U.S. that's actually going to torch us in the eastern U.S. next week. In fact, I think areas in the southeast and the eastern U.S. can get to the mid-90s next week. So, by the way, don't bring out them mums. I'm always big here in the South. Don't buy them mums in September, guys. You could still get very hot weather, and trust me, I'm not going to get into a rant about this. I love mums. I love them fall mums, but it seems like they always get torched very easily with the heat. But anyways, let's keep moving here. So here comes this system. And here it is. It begins to turn because it begins to strengthen. A more stronger storm is able to gain more latitude. It begins to go north. But all of a sudden, at the same time, you now have a ridge, which has always been here on the model runs. It's always been here, but the idea before was that this was going to get right into here and strengthen right into here and then head on out before the ridge builds. But this is the ridge, the reds, or whatever color you want to call this on your screen. It was going to find this weakness and head on out, but because these models are wanting to say, hey, this is going to stay weak, it does not find that weakness, and by the time the Euro wants this to start to gain some strength, here comes some ridging that builds on top of it, and what happens is the flow around this ridging is like this. So you got a directional flow that moves like this. So what's happening is it yanks on this tropical storm and kind of pulls this way into Florida. And not only does it build on top of it, it builds on top of it and then builds to its northeast. So, I mean, it can't, unless it's a significant hurricane, which is not on the European, on the latest, it can't really move northeast. So you still got that pull, the flow moving like this, and this actually pushes it into Florida as a tropical storm. Now, the GFS, which is that much more aggressive model, what does it do? Here it is. You see this little blue down here? That's Fiona. Fiona affects the Dominican Republic, Haiti, gets into the Bahamas. Same deal, stays weak too long. And of course, the GFS is much more substantial with this ridging. And like I said, the flow going around this ridging like this. So this is already filling the flow. At the same time, it's starting to feel a little bit of weakness that it can escape right here, but not before this ridging, which is going to torch the U.S. next week, builds over this storm. And not just builds over it, does the same thing as the European does. Builds over it, and that flow is moving like this, and it's pulling this system. It's tugging on it and making it go towards the eastern seaboard. And at this point, it's becoming a very strong system, but there's something between a mixture between this trough eating away this ridge and this being a very strong storm. A very, very strong storm, a strong hurricane, like a major hurricane, can work through light ridging, weak ridging is what I'm trying to say. And that's kind of what happens here. And this happens a lot on the southeast. You very rarely get something like a Hugo, which plowed right into South Carolina. You need a special kind of setup like that. And with this, it seems like with Dorian, you had Dorian who did it, Matthew that did it. You got to have a situation like Florence where basically Florence got trapped under intense ridging, and it was just meandering, and it didn't know where to go. There was ridging around the top of it, and it just kind of just drifted, more so drifted into the Carolinas. But in this case, weak ridging, and it erodes completely. Therefore, it finds an escape before plowing right into the Carolinas, slams the Outer Banks, gets very close to Nantucket, and it heads on out. So, a lot of stuff on the table, guys. I hope that made sense for you guys. But that's all I got. Man, there's a lot to figure out, but this looks like it's going to be a big topic for the coming days. But there's also still a very high chance, guys, that this heads out to sea. It doesn't affect anybody. Still got to watch Bermuda. Got to watch everybody along the eastern U.S. And we still got to watch the Gulf of Mexico, guys. We got to watch everybody. So, God bless all y'all. Y'all have a great night. Thank y'all for tuning in, and y'all have a great rest of your evening.